In the year 196 of the Julian Empire's calendar, a new sun, the brightest and strongest in the continent's history, rose in the country and a new emperor, Sionel Gelasius Woodburg, was born. Sionel was the second prince, which strongly resembled the first emperor of the country. He had the same blonde hair and blue eyes, so that it even went so far as to call him the incarnation of the first emperor, yet he was born of a simple servant girl. The empress and the first prince considered Sionel's existence a threat, so they forced him to keep quiet and not stand out. But he survived all the hardships and was able to grow his own power. The man won the struggle for the throne and overthrew the empress and the prince, so that he thus obtained the crown. But there was another reason for his fame. When the hero passed by people, those who looked at him with horror declared that the rumors were true and he really is a flower grown in hell. Despite his almost sculptural beauty, the man was given this nickname for his fighting skills and coolness, and there were rumors that a prestigious family of nobles tried to convince him to marry, but the idea eventually failed and the emperor was against it. It was even said that he had thrown some princess out of the bedroom. Many people tried to negotiate marriage to get the emperor's wealth and status, but he didn't pay the slightest attention to them. Sionel always had a loyal knight on his side, the protagonist named Lindell Buliachny. Having perfected her aura at a young age and earned the nickname of Knight, the girl sided with the second prince. The knights who followed the protagonist also joined the man's forces, and he came to win the battle for the throne, and she was the right hand and best knight of the emperor who fears nothing. The empire had a bright future as long as the emperor and she existed, but on the day of the coronation, everything changed, and a man approached the heroine and asked her to repeat what she had just said. With her head lowered guiltily, the girl explained that she wanted to leave the palace, but the man looked at her in surprise and assumed that he had a hearing problem because he simply could not agree that the knight who had promised to be his right hand would leave him at the coronation ceremony. Turning to the girl again, the man asked her to explain the reason so that he could understand, but she coughed violently without answering, which startled him. As he approached the girl who was now at his feet, the man remembered that she hadn't been using her aura lately, and he had also been told that she had started vomiting blood, but he couldn't believe it was actually happening. Now the emperor guessed that the rumors were true, and because of this his companion wanted to leave him, to which the latter, greatly embarrassed, replied that she had no idea what he thought, but that it was not so. Now the protagonist explained that she knew from the beginning that she just wouldn't, but his reaction was very different from her expectations. But since the empire has enough excellent knights, she has to explain everything to him well. With an enthusiastic look at the emperor, the girl declared that she was fine, as she had always been healthy. However, the emperor declared that he wouldn't believe it after she coughed up blood. Strongly indignant, the emperor cried, and afterwards, kneeling down in front of her and lifting her face to his, he explained that she had always been like this and had tolerated anything for his sake. So even this time, she had decided to run away so as not to be disturbed by his illness. Looking at the emperor with misunderstanding, the girl wondered what he was saying, but immediately rushed to explain that she was not sick. However, the emperor stated that she could stop pretending anymore. Looking fondly at his companion, the man explained that she should be honest with him because he could only expect it from her, and now he was going to do something about it. The emperor suggested that the girl bring healers to help her, and afterward added that if they failed, they would look for priests. But still, he would search the entire empire to find a cure and save her at any cost. After hugging his acquaintance, the man asked her not to leave to face death alone and also not to leave him as he was not going to let even death take her away. Not letting go of the interlocutor, the emperor added that she would never die because it was simply impossible for her to do so. And most importantly, the heroine now realized that she had no idea that he had thought so much about her, but she was not dying. Sionel thought the protagonist had a terminal illness due to the events that happened 6 months earlier. But that night was no different. From the heroine's flashbacks, we learn that it all started in her room when she guessed she was very tired when she came into it. She had a lot of training that day and came back exhausted. Heading to her bed, the heroine guessed that everything was as usual. But for some reason, she felt very heavy, and now even her shoulders were aching. But at the same moment, she felt something strange and drew her sword. Looking around, frightened, the girl asked who was here, to which an unfamiliar voice replied that she had a very keen sense of smell and called her the vice commander of the Emperor's Guard. Freezing in place, the girl realized that this feeling was very strange, and she had never felt such a feeling before. However, at the same moment, she saw a girl in front of her who introduced herself as Black Laroque and smiled insidiously. After a closer look, the protagonist asked when she had time to appear if she didn't even feel her presence, and she immediately explained that the interlocutor was considered the best knight in the Empire, so she came to offer a deal. Raising her hand and smiling, the girl asked her to become her contractor, adding that if she helped her, her deepest wish would come true. The guest added that if the heroine has a clear goal, it will immediately be fulfilled, so this is an incomparable chance. Realizing that anything she wants will be fulfilled, the girl thought about this proposal. Smiling sweetly, the guest confirmed that she would do anything if she signed a contract, but the heroine realized that there were some conditions because there was no such thing as free generosity. Now, the girl explained that her real body existed in this world, so he must find it and break the seal, for she thought the young lord of the Empire could not handle it. After listening to the girl's story, the heroine asked who was in front of her now if her body was sealed, to which the girl replied that she couldn't explain why that was the case, but she had been forced to place her soul in this temporary body made of mana. According to the girl, this form will last for 1 year, so in that time, she must break the seal of the real body for it to fulfill her wish. The main character remembered that being born as the illegitimate daughter of a noble family, she always wanted to be recognized by her father, and then she wanted to become stronger when she picked up a sword, so after meeting Sionel, she wished to make him emperor. But there is one thing she realized after so many wishes. Now, the heroine knew that no matter how hard you try, it's hard to do something with another person's feelings, so the guy became an emperor, but she never earned the recognition of her family, and the man whose attention she wanted to attract never looked at her. So she decided to agree with the girl and make a contract with her. A while later, the girl sitting in front of the emperor guessed that she wanted it so desperately that she made the decision without hesitation. But she didn't want such a thing, and now realized that coughing up blood was a side effect of adapting the dragon energy, but she couldn't tell about it, even though her body was healthy. The girl was not sure that the man would believe her words, but, looking at him fearfully, she decided at first to say that she was simply not sick, but the man, stroking her hair, declared that she would never leave him. When the man added that death would definitely not take his acquaintance, she looked at him with even more horror and tried to remove his hand, guessing that he would definitely not believe it, but explained that she had always been his knight and protected him so she would not die so easily. Noticing her interlocutor's surprise, the girl explained that she wasn't dying because she knew her body better than he did. She realized that coughing up blood might have surprised him, but she was really fine and he had nothing to worry about. Deciding not to listen to the girl, the emperor, turning to the knights, said that from this moment, Lindell Bodabachny is deprived of the title of knight and will be placed in the all-vertebrate palace so that the exit outside she is strictly forbidden. With a serious look at the people, the man explained that no one was to step a foot in there without his permission, and then, shifting his gaze to the girl, he added that she was forbidden to leave the palace and asked to be led away. Looking at the man in surprise, the protagonist couldn't believe what was happening and asked the emperor to wait a second so she could explain everything to him. But the knights who had already grabbed her explained that she'd better go. Now the protagonist even assumed that they were in a tawdry affair, since such a crazy situation was going on, but there was nothing to do, and she had to leave her post as a knight on the orders of Emperor Sionel, the man she loves. When the girl was brought to her room, the knights pushed her inside and asked her to rest, and then slammed the door behind her, which greatly surprised her. Now the protagonist was alone with her thoughts and guessed that she was locked in the palace. When the protagonist woke up, Luna, her faithful maid, came to her and explained that she had brought food, as she hadn't eaten in days and should have a little something to eat. With a worried look at the guest, the girl asked her assistant to leave the food near the entrance and then added that she would eat a little later, which upset her interlocutor, who asked her not to say so because she thought it was better to eat while everything was warm. Looking hopefully at the lady, The girl wondered if she would do as she told her, to which the lady again replied that she would eat later and should leave the food. With a frightened look at the heroine, the assistant explained that she would definitely get worse then, but the girl just couldn't get anything down her throat since she had been locked in here for a week and hadn't done anything. Thoughtfully averting her gaze, the protagonist realized that she couldn't tell the emperor everything, but she wanted to at least explain that she wasn't sick, but still the latter wouldn't give her a chance. So she thought he would visit her if she didn't eat or drink anything. In fact, the emperor never once came to see the protagonist, which upset her. And the maid, who did decide to get her way by pointing to the dish, explained that the chef had made duck soup because he had heard that it was her favorite dish. Frozen in place with surprise, the girl guessed that she had been brought soup from the chief, which meant that that arrogant old man had prepared something for her immediately, and the assistant explained that everyone was worried because she hadn't eaten anything. Having presented the dish to the girl, the assistant asked her to accept it and eat at least a couple of spoonfuls, as it would be a pity to throw away the food, which the heroine had to agree to, as her acquaintance asked her very insistently. It's been known since ancient times that knights shouldn't bring a girl to tears, so she decided to eat, reassuring herself that it wasn't about duck soup, but that she needed to follow the knightly code. Tiredly covering her eyes, the protagonist said that she could eat a little to show respect to the chef, which pleased her assistant, who immediately rushed to prepare everything and decided to start from the table. After hesitating a bit, the protagonist explained that she had no appetite at all, so she didn't necessarily need to set things up here, to which the maid replied that she needed to eat normally at least a little. Looking worriedly at the heroine, the assistant added that her body was already not in good shape, so it would take a lot of strength to fight the illness. But the knight realized that she was not sick, and it was just a side effect of the contract, so it was not about health. Now the protagonist realized that if she didn't find Larocque's body in a year, she'd be in real trouble, and she thought she'd go straight to the search instead of being stuck here. Approaching the protagonist and pulling a table towards her, the maid explained that everything would be fine, as she would always be there for her and be her strength. After studying the assistant, the protagonist guessed that she looked like she wanted to take her apart and was also looking at her with a hard stare. So, after much embarrassment, she just thanked her and pulled away a bit. Looking at the girl worriedly, the protagonist explained that she wasn't sick and that she should remember that, which she agreed with, although the girl realized that her interlocutor wasn't listening to her at all. Now the heroine wondered why no one believed her and what she should do next. She was worried about this as she needed to leave this place and start searching for Larocque's body sooner. Smiling sweetly, the maid wished the protagonist a pleasant appetite, and she grabbed her fork and decided that she didn't know what would happen next, but she had to eat first and only then think. Just as the girl was about to start eating, a voice was heard outside the door. This put the heroine out of her mind, as she had already set herself to eat, but she was immediately informed that the emperor had come. Putting aside her fork, the protagonist rejoiced at his arrival, but he, approaching her and looking at the dish, which was untouched, guessed that she had again not eaten a spoonful and was again refusing to eat. In fact, the heroine realized that it was all because he interrupted her. But the man approached her and put his hand on her shoulder and asked if she was going to starve to death. Confused, the girl wondered what he was talking about and tried to take his hand away, but immediately realized that he was angry. It was surprising because it had happened before, but the man was careful with his words, but now it was as if he had gone mad. Looking sternly at the protagonist, the man wondered if she meant to say that the former knight who couldn't stand even that was fine. But the woman, dismissing his hand with irritation, explained that she wasn't sick or dying, but that there had simply been a misunderstanding. The emperor, losing his temper, asked his acquaintance to explain why she was coughing up blood right in front of his eyes, to which the latter, badly frightened and looking away, could not give an answer, although she realized that it was all because of the contract, but she could not tell Sionel about it. The man asked the healer to come to the girl and help her, which he agreed to do, and, taking her hand, began to measure her pulse, but the girl realized that no matter how much you measure her pulse, he would not understand anything. The protagonist knew that a human wouldn't be able to sense a contract with a demon, so the old man lowered his head thoughtfully and concluded that she had less strength and her pulse had become a little unstable. When the man asked his guest about the reason for the girl's condition, he explained that he had given his healer a week. So it couldn't be that he hadn't found anything, and he should guess what would happen to him if he didn't come up with a cure. Fearfully frozen in place, the old man offered to kill him, and afterwards, falling on his knees before the girl, began to beg the man to do so, as he could not understand the reason. With a horrified look at her guest, the girl asked him to stop it now, as an innocent person should not suffer because of her. After that, turning to the healer, who looked at her, she explained that his fault was not here, so he need not worry. Lowering her head, the protagonist admitted that no matter how long she was here, they wouldn't fix the cause. In fact, she realized that she couldn't tell the truth about the contract and needed to change the emperor's mind quickly to get out of here because she didn't have time for all of this. With a serious look at the emperor, the girl asked him to send her away, but he replied that he had given her a week to get her senses in order, but he never thought it would lead her to such useless thoughts. Grasping his head painfully, the man guessed that apparently this healer was unable to help her, so he was going to bring every healer in the empire or even the world to the girl to cure her. The emperor looked at the protagonist and asked her not to think foolish thoughts and stay here, but she disagreed and explained that her role in the palace was over, as the prince she was helping had already become the emperor he wanted to be. Now the girl realized that the borders of the empire were stronger than ever, and the man was securely in control of the situation inside and outside the palace, and all the people were following him. So no one else would stand in his way, and she had no reason to stay here. What the girl said was true, for she herself had followed the man since childhood because she loved him. She annoyed him, but he could not drive her away because he thought her capable. Usually the protagonist always followed the emperor, but now she was going to be the first to let go of that hand. But the man did not want to give up because he was stubborn. Guiltily lowering her head, the girl explained that she knew she had been annoying the head of the empire since she was a child. So he must have been waiting for this moment, and now she was volunteering to leave, so he should let her go. The protagonist has decided that she'll take care of the case quickly and return when she fulfills the contract. And the man should be perfectly aware that such a thing will happen. Looking at the girl with astonishment, the emperor turned to his assistants and asked them to leave the room and leave them alone. But they did not immediately follow his order, and he looked at them with hatred and hurriedly drove them away. And the girl immediately realized when she saw the emperor's face that today she could die by his hand. The protagonist looked at the emperor fearfully, wondering what she should do now. Moreover, she was angered by the fact that the aides did not intercede for her, but simply left. Freezing in place, the girl guessed that a strange atmosphere hung, which meant that the emperor must be very angry with her and might kill her before the contract. Looking seriously at the girl, the boy asked if she thought her role was over if she had made him emperor and now she was going to leave him and abandon him because of it. With a horrified look in his eyes, the girl remembered that she had asked him to send her away, but it sounded like he had been betrayed, even though he had always sent her away before. Now the protagonist had been socializing with the expectation that he didn't care about her, but they had come to a relationship where he now didn't want her to leave him. Approaching the interlocutor, the man asked why she was afraid of him, but greatly embarrassed and not answering his question, the heroine explained that it was not that at all. When the man came close to the girl, he wondered why then she wanted to leave him and run away. He even cried with pity. And the girl realized that she couldn't believe she had hurt him so badly. With a worried look at his interlocutor, the emperor stated that she should have told him right away that she was sick and also asked him to save her, but she didn't, and now he was upset with her. What was happening was very surprising to the main character because she acted so obviously that almost the whole country knew about her feelings for him, but not him, because the emperor will never open his heart. In fact, the man was even pushing her away as if he wanted a master-knight relationship, so she had counted on him not to cling to her if she left, yet now he was crying. Kneeling down in front of the girl and grabbing her hands, the emperor asked her to never leave him and always be there for him, and she felt his hands trembling. Leaning the heroine's hands against his face, the man, crying even harder, noticed that she was sitting in front of him with a shameless face as usual, but now she should tell him that she loved him. Now the emperor didn't look like he had mopped up his entire entourage and led the empire, and he also wanted her to ask for his help and promised that she would stay here. Embarrassed, the girl looked away and explained that it was impossible, and afterwards, taking her hands away from his face, she explained that she could only say that he didn't love her. Looking at the girl in surprise, the guy froze in place, and she explained that it wasn't his fault, but he would definitely get in trouble if she stayed around. The protagonist added that she had always annoyed him, and he hated her, so she didn't understand at all why he was doing this now. That was all she said, and she wondered if that would be enough. Guiltily covering her eyes, the girl wanted to add something, but the man, humming and laughing, looked at her strangely, so that she even assumed that he had gone mad. Without stopping laughing, the man, approaching the girl again, interrogated whether she thought he hated her, and after touching her face again, apologized to her and said he was mistaken. Now the emperor has given the heroine permission to blame him for everything and curse him, even if it's every day. But she shouldn't leave because he's not going to let her go. When the emperor pressed himself against the protagonist, she wondered again why he was acting this way. She hoped he would easily agree and let her leave. Having torn the girl from her musings, the man declared that he loved her, so that the girl, fearfully frozen in place and trying to avert her gaze, assumed that she had heard it, for he had no reason to say such a thing. The emperor looked at his interlocutor with despair and guessed that it was useless to say it now, because he knew that he would not hold her with such words. But she stopped listening to him and asked who loved whom. Noticing the surprise of his interlocutor, the man explained that she really understood everything correctly, and he loved her. So she guessed that now her love was not unrequited, but she could not believe it and thought that he had lost his head. Looking at the man with astonishment, the protagonist did not believe that the magnificent emperor loves her, as it is simply impossible, and she remembers how everyone laughed at her feelings for him and also offered her to surrender. But now her dreams have come true. Turning away from the man and blushing, the girl asked him if he loved her, and his companion immediately guessed that she liked it so much that it made her shiver. Tiredly grabbing his head, the man summarized that he understood that it was hard to believe such sudden words, but the protagonist really liked it a lot and did not have time to evaluate the situation that happened suddenly. Now the girl realized that if it was true, she couldn't even guess what would happen to her wish, because the reason she had made it was because of the thought that Sionel hated her. Noticing the confusion of his beloved, the man allowed her not to believe his words, as it was his own fault, but she believed him. But still he added that she would soon become empress. Frightened and frozen in place, the girl realized that he had spoiled her plan, but he reached out his hand to her hair and explained that soon she would be his empress, so she would not go anywhere and would always be with him. After thinking about it, the protagonist realized that of course she loved Sionel, but he said those words at the most inopportune time, and so she thought he was completely crazy. When the protagonist heard that she would soon become empress, she was frightened and froze in place, but the man confirmed it, explaining that everything had already been decided. After thinking about it for a moment, the girl explained that it wasn't something the emperor could decide on alone, as the nobles would definitely oppose it. So if he made the earl's illegitimate daughter the empress, there would be no end to the scandals, and it wouldn't help his rule at all. Looking sternly at the girl, the man explained that he was choosing his wife, so no one would dare to interfere with him, and then repeated again that everything had already been decided and nothing would change. Now the protagonist has realized that she is going to be made not even a concubine, but an empress. And in fact, she has great power, because she is the only person who can stand on the same level with the emperor, but the responsibility corresponds to the high rank. It would be a lie to say that the nobles only enjoy power and eating good food, for the girl is very aware of how much work is heaped on the heads of people with power. In fact, the protagonist loved Sionel, but never thought of becoming an empress, as she wants a comfortable life and entertainment. Even the knight's duty was difficult for the girl, and he was offering her to work for the empire until she was very old. But that wasn't what mattered now, because she needed to leave the palace and find the dragon's body to fulfill the contract, and if she failed, she would actually die. deciding that it was impossible to allow her death. The girl exclaimed that she did not want to become an empress, but the emperor reiterated that she still had no choice even if she was so disgusted to be around him. Much frightened, the girl explained that she didn't mean it at all, and the man asked her to forget about the thought of running away and dying alone, as he wouldn't let it happen. Having lost her temper, the girl guessed that he wasn't listening to her at all, so she repeated that she wasn't dying and was completely healthy. But he turned around and headed for the exit and decided to end this conversation, allowing her to consider him selfish. But he wouldn't be able to let her go. Grabbing the doorknob, the man once again repeated that the girl would become empress even if she started to hate him, and she, left alone with her thoughts and falling to her knees, realized that he was crazy, and everything became even more confusing because of the misunderstanding. From the beginning, the man shouldn't have seen her coughing up blood, and now he's going to lock her up in the palace because he thinks she's resigned to death, so the heroine just has no idea what to do, because if things continue, she's actually going to die. Now the girl heard Larocque's voice, who guessed that apparently her plan had failed, so she asked who had started it all, but she realized that all the problems were because of the contract with the dragon. The guest explained that she didn't know what the guy had said to her, but that was no reason to throw a pillow at her. Losing her temper, the heroine began to beg her to cancel the contract, to which Larocque replied that it was impossible to refuse after she had already signed it, so she had to hurry up and find her body. The protagonist didn't think it would get so complicated, but she had no choice and had to tell her acquaintance about what had happened, so she looked at her thoughtfully and wondered what was wrong with the emperor loving her. Tensing up, the protagonist explained that she wouldn't be able to fulfill part of the contract if it stayed that way because Sionel didn't want to let her out of the palace. The girl suggested that she simply run away secretly, find the body, break the seal, and return, but the heroine immediately explained that it was not so easy, because in the palace there is a powerful ancestral barrier, and it will not break even a few great wizards. The protagonist added that if she tried to pass anyway, there wouldn't even be any bones left of her, to which her companion replied that it wasn't a problem at all, as it was just a barrier she could deal with. Sighing tiredly, the protagonist reminded her that they were in a palace and a simple spell would not break such a thing, but she explained that she was always underestimating her. With a sly smile, the girl reminded him that she was a dragon, called Lords of Magic, so she would never be stopped by a simple barrier created by humans. Looking sternly at her interlocutor, the girl stated that she couldn't even find her own body. But this situation, she said, was a bit peculiar, and she suggested that the landlady of the room just take a look. When the guest raised her hand, she explained that a single hand movement was enough. But as soon as she tried to cast the spell and snapped her fingers, nothing happened. Shuddering desperately, the protagonist reminded her that this was exactly what she meant, but the guest was greatly surprised and asked her to wait as it was strange. Without realizing what was bothering the guest, the protagonist explained that they were in the imperial palace, and in the veins of previous emperors flowed the blood of dragons. And this barrier was strengthened by generations, so it worked for hundreds of years and cannot be destroyed by the forces of the sealed dragon. Tiredly rubbing her head, the girl summarized that it was impossible to use magic here, and only pure human power or the divine power of the priests would help. After hearing her interlocutor's statement, the guest wondered what she should do then, for if she could not escape, she would be in trouble. After losing her temper, the girl shouted that the emperor didn't care at all about the fate of her acquaintance, but it made her angry because she spoke about it very suddenly. Now the girl explained that there would have been no problems if the protagonist had not contacted him, to which the latter replied that all her problems had started because of her, and sometime later, after a long argument, Larocque declared that she could not believe that she had chosen such a man. Determined not to give up, the girl explained that the protagonist had the willpower to live a long life, so she must have been able to convince the emperor since she was the empire's best knight. The protagonist did not respond to the compliment of her acquaintance, but realized that, apparently, to cancel the contract will not work, and time is running and every minute counts. So she needs to find a solution. Rising abruptly, the girl remembered that they had a contract that affected both parties, so if they dug into the terms and conditions, they could find a way to get out of here. Noticing the surprise of her interlocutor, the protagonist explained that there was a barrier on the palace, but she was still able to get here. So if it wasn't the Magi, then the terms of the contract must have helped. With a relieved exhale, the girl realized that there was hope. So she asked her acquaintance to get the contract so they could find a loophole. But the girl, embarrassed and guessing that it would require reading the entire contract, explained that it would take too long and they should find another solution. Thinking about it, the protagonist remembered that it wasn't that hard, since there were only 13 pages in the contract, so she could look at it herself. But when her acquaintance got nervous, she immediately realized that she was hiding something. Smiling embarrassedly, the guest explained that the contract was a bit bigger and she had only shown her the most important part. However, there was a bit more information, but she didn't want to bore her, so she pulled out the most important part. Rising from her seat and looking sternly at her guest, the protagonist asked her to show her the contract now, and when the girl saw the falling sheets, she realized that she had been tricked. Looking around in horror, the girl wondered how a contract could even have so many pages if she had only seen a few, and the guest, noticing her strange reaction, explained that there were over 1,500 pages. Fearfully frozen in place, the girl guessed that the one showed her only 13 pages and hid the rest, to which the one replied that she had already said that she had only taken out the most important part. Calling her interlocutor a fraud, the protagonist, looking at her sternly, asked if she had any conscience at all, to which she did not answer, but asked her to calm down and discuss everything. Having lost her temper, the protagonist grabbed the interlocutor. But sometime later, realizing that there was no end and no edge, and there were too many conditions for her here, began to go through the sheets. Looking at the contents of the next sheet, the protagonist noticed that at some point, everything became very confusing. And after all, she had made a mistake in signing the contract, and now everything had come to this. However, the fulfillment of any wish was too tempting an offer, and the protagonist could break the dragon's seal and gain freedom, so she agreed. The girl was attracted to the fact that you could ask for anything, and she thought about getting help in winning the emperor's heart. But she didn't know that it would become such a problem. When the guest approached the girl, the latter looked at her hatefully and asked her to keep her hands up. But the latter was already sick of them and apologized to her again. Angry, the protagonist wondered how she dared to say such a thing when she knew what terms were written in the contract and who was to blame for having to verify so much information. After not getting an answer to her questions, the girl stood up from the table and exclaimed that no matter how much you read this contract, there was no end in sight. So she didn't even know whether she would die faster from overwork or from anger at the girl. Smiling embarrassedly, Larocque explained that she wasn't going to die, which the protagonist confirmed, but added that exhaustion wasn't going anywhere. So she was starting to think she wouldn't be able to fulfill the terms of the contract, but she wasn't going to die. When the girl tried to say that she would definitely find the dragon's real body, she fell to the ground and coughed up blood again. And afterwards, she realized that the side effects were becoming more frequent due to her emotional state. Leaning over in front of the girl and looking at her fearfully, the guest inquired if she was all right, but immediately hastened to shove the huge amount of papers away from her, explaining that the contract might get dirty. Looking closely, the protagonist noticed the space that the girl had created and asked if it was possible to put a person in it. So she immediately realized that in that case, the girl would be able to carry her outside. Tensing up, the girl explained that living creatures weren't allowed in there unless she wanted instant death from ruptured viscera, so the protagonist immediately realized that she was of no use. Looking at her hand, which was now covered in blood, the girl wondered how long this coughing would last, to which the guest honestly replied that she had no idea. The protagonist understood that this was proof that her body was adapting to fulfill the wish as quickly as possible, so you could say that the blood was a byproduct of the process. But she would never have made a wish if she knew she would cough up blood. Now everyone around her thought the girl was dying, and she had to clean up without anyone seeing, which made her very tired. But this time, she decided to do it on her own. Guessing that her guest wanted to help her, the girl suggested that she had better sort out the contract since the room was a mess, and she added that she should return everything to the table when she collected it so that no pages were lost. Looking at her interlocutor with surprise, the girl could not believe that she was really going to read everything, But she had no choice and had to stay up nights to study the content of the contract, but to find something strange in it. With a frown, Larocque declared that she would definitely live a long life, and the protagonist immediately wondered why the contract was now appearing so calm and why she had made this mess. Smiling sweetly, the girl explained that it was more efficient that way, but it almost made the protagonist faint. But no sooner had she finished speaking than a servant informed her that someone had come to see her. Now the guest guessed that her acquaintance was not ready for the arrival because her room was in a terrible state. But at the same moment, the voice of the commander was heard outside the door. Fearfully frozen in place, Larocque asked the protagonist what they should do now, but the latter asked her to be quiet because she was thinking, but wondering again why the commander of the guard had come so suddenly, she decided to chase her acquaintance away first. No sooner had the girl finished than she noticed that her acquaintance had already escaped, which meant she was very good at leaving her behind, but she still left the papers on the table so anyone entering would find it suspicious. Guessing that there was no time, the protagonist shoved a stack of papers under the bed, deciding that he would not look there. And afterwards she realized that she needed to change clothes and put away the rest, so she asked the commander to wait. When the girl tried to run to get things done faster, she hit her finger hard, and it hurt so much that she thought she had broken it and wondered why this was happening to her. Hearing the girl scream, Shrane Empister, the commander of the guard that reports personally to the emperor, rushed into her room, and then, noticing the huge amount of papers, a broken vase, and drops of blood on the floor, guessed that something had happened to her. Grabbing her leg, the protagonist asked the guest why he had entered. She now realized that this story was only going to get worse. So grabbing the man by his clothes, she asked him to wait a bit so she could explain everything to him. After calming down a bit, the protagonist said that she hit her foot on the bed so that the interlocutor immediately realized that she was going to lie in order not to bother him. Being very frightened, the man asked to call the doctor as soon as possible, and afterwards explained that he didn't think it was that serious, so it was definitely his fault, but the doctor would be here soon, and she should be patient for a while. Now, sitting in front of the commander of the guard, the protagonist guessed that everyone misunderstood her for some reason, and the latter, looking at her sadly, asked if she was sure that everything would be all right if she didn't call a doctor. Smiling sweetly, the girl explained that she was fine and nothing would change if the doctor came, and the man should know that himself. The commander is known for being strict with all knights, so she's surprised by his kind side, but he realized that his acquaintance's hope is so badly dashed that she says it so calmly, and yet he knew her not at all like this. The protagonist realized that healers and doctors would only get in the way, because then the emperor would come, and she wouldn't have the courage to endure one more look like that, and then she definitely wouldn't be able to get out of here. Sighing tiredly, the man turned to the girl again and wanted to say something, but she looked at him fearfully and remembered that he was still here. She had forgotten about him because she was thinking too much about the emperor. After a moment's hesitation, the man guessed that the girl couldn't put her thoughts in order, so he decided not to say anything and explained that he had sent the knight to fetch the maid, so she should lie down and wait for her arrival. Holding out his hand to the protagonist, the commander said that he would help her and that she should lean on him. So the latter, deciding not to resist, grasped it and guessed that her leg was still shaking because she had hit it hard. Even though her interlocutor agreed with what she said, the protagonist guessed that it didn't look like he believed her, but just thought she would treat him better if he pretended not to notice. Excitedly examining the girl, the man noticed that there was a lot of blood on her clothes, probably due to coughing, and then asked how often this happened. Now the protagonist guessed that she had completely forgotten about it, so now it would be difficult to do laundry, but, determined not to give up, she explained to the man that this was the first time this was happening and it had never happened before. The girl realized that she had better dress in something dark now, and afterwards added that this blood only looked horrible, just like she said, but it was actually fine. So the man gave her a serious look and realized that she thought of others first and not herself. But this time it was better to put herself first. Grinning, the girl wondered if the man thought there was someone else here who thought as much of herself as she did, and he now guessed he had been too busy to pay attention before. The commander realized the room was chaos, and there was no way the girl could have arranged something like this when she couldn't control her body, so he was sure someone had come before him. Now, the guest remembered that the knight had told him that something had happened to the girl, for first the emperor was here, and now he. These words surprised him very much, for he had not expected that the head of the empire was already here. Recalling the knight's words, the man assumed that the protagonist's room had become like this after the emperor's visit, which meant that he really hated her a lot. He just couldn't believe that the man had gone that far. Tensing up, the protagonist guessed that she had no idea what the commander was thinking, but sensed danger. So, deciding to defuse the situation, she explained that the room was such a mess as it was uncomfortable to stay here, and she decided to spread out some things. As he approached the girl, the man asked her not to hide anything from him, and to speak honestly, which surprised her, and then he added that she should just forget it, because she might get upset if he found out something he shouldn't know. Tiredly lowering her head, the protagonist realized that she felt that she had already lost control of the situation, but she just didn't understand why no one wanted to help her and didn't believe a single word she said. This disappointed the protagonist because she thought it would be easier to leave the place with the commander. So now she has no idea what to do. However, the latter once again pulled her away from her thoughts and asked if she still loved the emperor. Blushing with embarrassment and looking away, the girl admitted that her feelings had not subsided. Even in such a situation, she felt excitement when she heard the emperor's name. Speaking again, the girl explained that it was not only she who felt it, but that the emperor loved her too. Though she said it aloud, she could not believe it herself, for it was all like a dream. Noticing her interlocutor's surprise, the protagonist explained that she herself was surprised, but he had told her that personally when he came, and now she realized that the long wait had been worth it, but she didn't understand why the guest had asked her that. The protagonist remembered that she had a huge number of more pages to check and things to do when she got out. So if she heard a confession after this case, she'd be happy too. Now a strange atmosphere hung in the room, and the protagonist assumed she had hurt the commander, who was lonely as she sat and cheered herself. However, the man said nothing, and she assumed he was in a lot of pain. When the man grabbed his face, the protagonist guessed that she didn't want it to happen. But the man immediately cried, and she wondered why he was reacting so much to the fulfillment of his subordinate's dream that his eyes even bled. Shrinking in surprise, the girl wondered what she should do now. But what really bothered the man was that his interlocutor said she was fine. But it was at times like this that she feared death the most. Tensing up, the girl didn't understand why this should even bother her. So she decided that if the man was jealous of her, he should find a mate too, though he didn't necessarily have to go that far. At the same moment, a maid burst into the room, which frightened the protagonist. But a little later, the girl rejoiced because she guessed that her savior came just in time. After taking a few steps forward, the maid fell to her knees in front of the protagonist and grabbed her hands, and the latter looked at her in surprise and asked why she was crying so suddenly. The girl who had the tantrum suggested that her landlady was so bad that her room had turned into this, so she immediately realized that the one was very poor and she needed to do something for her. Looking at the main character, the maid noticed that she was coughing up blood again, but she kept saying that she was fine, even though it wasn't true. And the girl also assumed that she looked so shocking that she even scared her subordinate. Grabbing the maid by the shoulders, the girl explained that everything was fine and she was just exaggerating, but the assistant, losing her temper and pulling away from her mistress, asked why she always said that if she already knew everything. With a perplexed look at the maid, the protagonist asked what she knew about, to which the maid replied that she shouldn't think she was an idiot who didn't understand anything. However, the protagonist really didn't understand what was going on. In fact, the girl was only sleeping, eating, and fooling around, so the maid thought that she was already at her limit, and she was also moving lazily, chewing her food and staring into the void as if she was not thinking about anything. Now, the assistant confessed that she was upset because such behavior of the lady is not suitable for a person who is called an unlucky genius, and the lady immediately realized that she seemed very lazy and had already managed to think of a nickname for her. Strongly embarrassed, The protagonist tried to explain to the assistant that this nickname seemed very strange to her, but the latter did not want to listen to her for a second because she knew everything. Interrupting the maid, the girl explained that she didn't think the maid knew anything. However, with her former excitement, the maid examined her mistress and asked her to just rely on her. And the maid realized that things had only gotten worse while she did nothing. Looking excitedly at her mistress, the helper informed her that she would always protect her because she would always remember her that day. Entering the room of the protagonist at night, the maid asked if she was still awake, and then offered to bring her a glass of wine if she couldn't sleep, but she wasn't sure she needed it. Covering the girl with a plaid and asking her to calm down with it, the maid guessed that her body was already out of order, so perhaps she had better sleep, but she repeated again that she was not ill. Covering her eyes guiltily, the girl explained to the maid that people always hear only what they want to hear. They don't need the truth and believe only what they want to believe. The main character added that she thinks people are pretty stupid, but she can't blame them for that because it's her own fault for everything that happens. Looking at the protagonist with surprise, the maid explained that it wasn't true, and although she didn't know why she was saying it, they were all really worried, to which she replied that she understood that they were good people, and so was she, but she didn't think there would ever be anyone who would care about her the way she did. After finishing her story, the girl added that she would always be grateful to the maid for this, so she hoped that a long and happy future awaited them. The maid looked fearfully at her interlocutor and assumed that she was going to die, which was why she was acting as if she was going to leave her soon and was enduring the pain so as not to scare the people around her. Leaning over to the heroine, the assistant explained that everything would be fine, which she immediately confirmed, but the maid realized that she couldn't let her go so easily, as she had always been good to her. And now she would be there for her, no matter what happened. Lowering her head, the maid guessed that the one was not moving because of pain and not eating because of a sore stomach, and was again pretending that everything was fine so as not to worry her. Now the protagonist guessed she didn't know what she was talking about, because sure, her actions were a bit lazy, but she had nothing else to do if she wasn't a knight anymore, and she didn't eat because healthy food tastes disgusting. The commander who came to the girl, hearing the maid's statement, questioned whether she was skipping meals because of her sick stomach, to which she replied that she simply did not like the taste. Frightenedly frozen in place, the man suggested that the condition of the former knight's body was so terrible that she couldn't even eat, and the girl guessed that the man didn't believe her. Not paying attention to the strange reaction of her interlocutor, the maid explained that her mistress was thinking about her loved ones, which was why she looked so devastated, although it was not really so. Moving closer to the man and away from the girl, the assistant explained to the man that the lady was still continuing to pretend so as not to cause them trouble. No matter how much the heroine tried to explain the truth to them, she came up with only one possible solution. So she asked her guests to leave her to be alone. When she realized that her request had no effect on people, the girl repeated again that she wanted them to leave her room, because now she didn't care whether she was sick, healthy, or dying because she just wanted to rest. Falling on the bed, the protagonist guessed that she felt much better after bathing. But now she decided that there was nothing she could do if something like this continued. Instead of constantly trying to correct this misunderstanding, it will be easier for the girl to not have to explain her condition every time, as the issue of escape should come first. Raving, the protagonist remembered the contract, and when she looked under the bed, she realized that no one had noticed, so she hid it in a good place, and you have to read it from time to time. Looking over the contract again, the protagonist realized that there were so many pages that it was hard to hope for a quick solution. So maybe she should talk to the emperor first, but she decided to do it tomorrow because she didn't have the energy today. First, the protagonist needed to be clear about her current state and what to do next, so she decided to start reading the contract. A while later, the girl wondered how many pages she had already read, but immediately noticed that there was still a whole mountain left. The protagonist realized that it would not be possible to examine such a pile of pages quickly, but it was already light outside, so now it was time for her to go to the emperor and try to persuade him to let her out of the room. Upon approaching the mirror, the protagonist noticed that her face was not in the best condition after a sleepless night, so people might misunderstand it. Now the heroine remembered that she stood guard all night during the national events, and then it did not cause any problems. And besides, it is impossible to postpone the conversation because at stake is the issue of the future empress. Just as the girl approached the door to leave the room, her maid came in and asked her what the circles under her eyes were, and then assumed that she hadn't been able to sleep. Severely embarrassed, the heroine explained that she was just a little busy, and the assistant flew up to her and exclaimed that she didn't need to do anything because she was just in a terrible state right now. Pulling away from the maid, the girl explained that she had something to do, so they could talk about it later. But the latter, realizing that her mistress would not back down, offered to see her off if it was urgent. Guessing that if she kept quiet, she could at least get out of here, the heroine decided to do so and let the girl lead her to the emperor. But when she left the room, she noticed that there were knights here. What surprised the protagonist most of all was that there were now not 2 knights standing outside her room, but 3. So the maid immediately explained that the emperor was angry about Sir Empester's visit and had decided to strengthen the guards of the northern palace, and more knights had been placed outside. The protagonist remembered wondering how the man had come to be here, and now she realized that apparently he had disobeyed an order from the emperor, and most knights respect the commander, so they were unlikely to interfere with him. After overhearing the girl's conversation, the knight explained that the commander of the guard was now forbidden to visit the place, and afterwards asked the girl what had happened to her, adding also that he was going to call a doctor if she felt unwell. Looking indifferently at the knight, the protagonist explained that there was no need to call the doctor as she wanted to meet the emperor in person, to which the knight replied that he didn't know what the reason was, but it was impossible, so she should return to her room immediately. Pushing the guard and maid away, the girl stated that it was an urgent matter so they should get out of the way, but the man immediately returned to his seat, explaining that he couldn't let her in, and she needed to get back to her place. After losing her temper, the protagonist realized she didn't want to go that far, but if they were going to think she was sick, she was willing to play along, so she immediately collapsed, clutching her heart. The girl decided to pretend to be sick, so the knights, believing her to be sick, asked for a doctor quickly, and as soon as the passage opened, she jumped up and flew past them. Reacting quickly, the knights guessed that the girl was running away, so they should catch her. But the girl now rushed forward and realized that they were very noisy, so if this continued, she would be surrounded. Suddenly, in front of the protagonist was the emperor, who grabbed her hand and pressed her to him, which greatly angered her, and he himself was surprised that she came. After hugging the protagonist, the emperor asked her why she was here. She was very flustered when she came face to face with the man, even though she was looking for him. The protagonist, averting her gaze, turned to the emperor, but the latter, looking at her in surprise, inquired if she was so disgusted by his name that she called him by his title. Strongly frightened, the girl explained that this was not the case at all, and the one approaching her asked what she was doing here, but at the same moment, the knights who came apologized to the head of the empire for the mistake, explaining that they deserved to die. Turning around, the girl realized that this was how the knights would definitely be punished, so it shouldn't happen because of her. So she immediately grabbed onto her lord and pleased him by addressing him by name. Noticing the surprise of the interlocutor, the girl explained that she was looking for him, but he did not believe it, and the heroine immediately guessed that she would be considered a liar for the rest of her life. When the girl had her senses in order, she realized that she had to speak carefully because innocent knights and her maid could not be allowed to be punished. So crossing her arms, the girl wondered if the emperor didn't believe her. Frozen in place, the knight and the assistant began to observe what was happening, and the girl explained to the man that she wanted to see him since he had left yesterday, but never returned. Having pressed herself against the emperor, the girl had decided that would be enough, because he would definitely not bitch about such an insult, and now she felt uncomfortable with what he would say back to her. As she looked at the emperor, the protagonist noticed that he was smiling, but she never thought he could make such an expression, but now he was even more beautiful up close. Remembering that there were people behind them, the girl froze fearfully in place, and the emperor immediately promised to visit her more often and asked her not to leave the room again. Frowning, the girl realized that his words made it sound like she was imprisoned in the palace, but she wanted to get out of here. So deciding to address the issue, she explained to her interlocutor that she didn't want to sit inside, but wanted out. After stopping the girl, the man explained that she couldn't leave the palace because it was too dangerous outside and she wasn't the same now, but the heroine exclaimed that she was no different. Thinking about it, the girl realized that it was very tiresome, as she could not tell about the contract. But she must think of something, and the man, noticing her displeasure, explained that he was trying to say that she herself must understand the reason. Putting his head down on his lover's shoulder, the man asked her to come back to the room, and she immediately realized that he was trying to push her feelings to convince her so she should do the same. Clenching her hand into a fist, the heroine stated that she is lonely and sad in that room, and every day she feels like her heart is getting worse. She thinks too much about loneliness and feels like the world rejects her when no one is around. Pulling away from the girl a little, the man stated that it was his mistake, and afterward added that he never thought she was visited by such thoughts. Now the protagonist guessed that her plan had worked, but taking her beloved by the hand again, the interlocutor explained that she was not alone and she should not worry because it would not happen again because she would move to his palace. Noticing the girl's surprise, the emperor explained that it was against the law, but an exception could be made for the future empress. These words made her mad because she wanted to leave the room, but things only got worse. Tensing up, the girl tried to explain that she didn't mean that, but now the emperor, smiling sweetly, said that she shouldn't worry, as she wouldn't feel loneliness now since she would be living with him. Disappointed, the protagonist realized that she was finished because she had dug her own grave, and if she was also put in his room, it would be more difficult to get out of the palace, and after all, the question of becoming an empress is not solved. So, again, turning to the man, she explained that she could not become his empress. Noticing the surprise of the interlocutor, the girl explained that she was a former knight, the bastard child of an earl, and she had no education of a lady because it was replaced by swordsmanship, so the daughter of a duke or a marquis would be suitable for the place of empress, but not her. Strongly frightened, the general, who had been listening to their conversation all this time, rushed forward, much to the surprise of the girl, who did not understand where he had come from. Approaching the lady, the man explained that she was more suited to the role of empress than anyone else, as there was no man who did not know of the loyalty and love with which she had served the emperor. So she was his greatest treasure. Hearing the man's statement, the girl lost her temper and wondered what he was even talking about. But other people also confirmed that only the main character would be suitable because there are simply no other candidates for this place. Approaching the girl, the noble interlocutor said that they hoped that she would become their empress, which was immediately confirmed by his acquaintance. And the protagonist did not understand where so many nobles came from. Glancing at his beloved again, the emperor explained that most of the nobles agreed with the decision, so she shouldn't be told that she wasn't suitable for the role. Looking around, the girl wondered where her doctor was and why he wouldn't say anything. She knew the man was too stubborn to give up on the idea, so if even the pressure to feel didn't help, she would have to take it further. Taking the girl's hand, the man noticed that the girl's limb was cold, so stated that the maid should carry her things so they could go to his palace. Pushing the emperor away and snatching her hand from his arm, the girl replied in the negative, adding that she couldn't be here, which angered the man who tried to stop her. At the same moment, the nobles who were watching the scene screamed in fright, and the girl still didn't understand what had happened and assumed that she had simply overdone it when she hit the emperor on the arm, but immediately she smelled a strange smell of iron. Looking closer, people noticed that the girl's nose was bleeding. The bleeding was severe, so she immediately guessed that it was all because she had sat over the contract for a long time during the night. Hurriedly wiping away the blood, the protagonist explained that it wasn't what they thought it was. In fact, it was because she hadn't slept that night, because blood can come out if you're very tired. Deciding to divert attention from her problem, the protagonist offered the emperor to continue the conversation and discuss the place of the empress. But, greatly frightened, the knights decided to bring the doctor here as soon as possible. Throwing herself at the people, the girl declared that they should listen to her, and afterward she tried to say that she was perfectly fine, But the emperor picked her up in his arms and covered her mouth, telling her to shut up and just hold on to him. Ignoring the girl's surprise, the man carried her to the other side and, holding her tightly against him, promised that everything would definitely be all right. As the protagonist lay in bed in Sionel's bedroom, surrounded by the emperor and servants, she realized that she didn't think they would go this far. Tensing up, the girl guessed that no matter how much you explained, people still acted as if she was a patient. So, deciding to break the hanging silence, the heroine, turning to the emperor, said that she was fine, and he probably had a lot of other things to do, so he should go. With a worried look at the poor woman, the man explained that she shouldn't worry because the healer would be here soon, and now was not the time to worry about him. The maids who watched the protagonist guessed that the one was very noble, because even in such a situation first thinks of the emperor, but in fact, the one tried to chase him away because she was tired of it. Worried, the maids began to think about what they could do to make her feel better. But at that very moment, a healer rushed to the lady, promising to activate a recovery spell right away. As he approached the girl and grabbed her hand, the old man began to cast a spell, and the girl, looking at him indifferently, guessed that it didn't matter how many times he used magic because she wasn't sick and nothing would help her. Pulling her hand out of the healer's grasp, the girl asked him to take a break, as it was hard to do that after coming in right afterward. But the healer, greatly embarrassed, guessed that she was still thinking about him while in such a state. Falling to his knees in front of the protagonist, the old man asked her not to worry as she had to suffer so much because of his incompetence, so he shouldn't rest, while at the same time the emperor, losing his temper, asked the comer what state she was in. Reaching for the girl's arm again, the old man explained that the man had nothing to worry about, as some small veins were weakened due to fatigue, but she would recover when she was properly rested. Guiltily lowering his head and clutching his face, the man asked the girl if she was going to get herself together after she started bleeding from the slightest movement. Looking at his lover anxiously, the emperor assumed that she had not slept and was feeling some discomfort, but that she replied that it was not that and simply could not sleep. She realized that she could not tell that she had been reading the rogue's contract all night, so she decided not to go into details. When the protagonist noticed that the man didn't believe her, she tried to say something, but the healer jumped back into the conversation and asked the mistress if she was having episodes of pain or if maybe she was out of breath. Concerned, the girl explained that she had no pain and that she was out of breath because she hadn't eaten much. So the old man immediately asked how long she had lost her appetite and how often she felt dizzy. Now, the healer guessed that the heroine's back was tense and her legs were weak, which she immediately confirmed, realizing that of course she wasn't feeling well after the bloody vomit. But the rest was natural if you lay there all day, so he was asking for nothing. Turning to the emperor, the old man explained that he had found the answer to the question of what his beloved was ill with, and afterward told him that it seemed to him that she had a distortion of the soul. Guiltily lowering her head, the healer could not believe that such a thing had happened to her, and the protagonist, immediately rising from her seat, guessed that no normal person would have believed it, and would have said that it was a simple plot from an old-fashioned novel. Looking seriously at the healer, the man asked the man what it meant, and the man immediately explained that the lady had not been seriously injured recently and had not been poisoned, so he focused on things whose symptoms took a long time to manifest. The healer now admitted that he had searched countless books and had been able to find a disease whose symptoms matched. It had been hard to believe at first, but now he was convinced that the heroine had a distortion of the soul. After losing her temper, the protagonist almost replied to the old man that it was the old man's head distortion. However, tensing up even more, the emperor asked why he thought so, to which he replied that she had the symptoms of a man who had been cursed long ago. After examining her hands, the protagonist remembered that her body is being rebuilt to fulfill her desires. So it's a process that happens regardless of the body owner's will, and in some ways, everything really does look like a curse. Looking at the old man with bewilderment, the girl couldn't believe that he had actually guessed what had happened to her, but he claimed that the curse had appeared a long time ago, although the contract had only recently been made. After thinking about it, the protagonist explained to people that it wasn't that long ago. But at the same moment, she guessed that she had accidentally said it out loud, and those around her realized that apparently she knew the truth. Upon hearing the old man's statement, the girl asked what it meant, and the man explained that she always reacted aloofly as if she already knew what was happening to her, so he believes she knew about her curse and also knew where it would lead. The emperor was furious and asked his beloved why she had not told them about it, but the old man, standing up for the girl, exclaimed that she could not have said it. When the healer approached the girl, she noticed that he began to cry and then explained that he thought the curse was meant for the emperor. Noticing the man's surprise, the healer explained that he had to say that the man had many enemies in the time before the coronation, so it was likely the culprit had put the curse on him back then. Out of breath, the girl wondered if the old man meant to say that the curse was aimed at the emperor, and he immediately explained that the man had started spending more time with the mistress when he turned 15, so felt discomfort or pain that disappeared after their first meeting. After thinking for a moment, the man confirmed the old man's hunch, and the man summarized that the girl had taken his curse back in the day, and now it had manifested. Crying, the healer asked the heroine how much longer she was going to protect the emperor, but she realized that it wasn't true at all, and coughing up blood couldn't be the emperor's fault, so he shouldn't take this nonsense seriously. Falling to his knees, the emperor laughed hysterically, and the girl approached him and asked if he was all right, but now he remembered that she had always said he had so many enemies and even then had promised to protect him at all costs. The man added that the girl had recently started saying that her enemies were gone and her role was over, so she was probably going to disappear, taking his curse with her, but he explained that he wouldn't be grateful to her if she died instead. Having guessed that the emperor believed, the protagonist decided that she had to do something, since he immediately decided that it was true and very strangely reacts exactly to the curse. Angry, the man wondered who could have done it, but the healer who had re-entered the conversation asked if there had been sorcerers around the past empress. From the memories of the heroine, we learn that the wife of the previous emperor was the Empress Dowager, but Sionel was born not even a concubine, but from a maid, so the latter hated him to death. The Empress constantly interfered with the guy, sent assassins, did a lot of bad things, and used any method to kill him, and even kept a sorceress by her side to take care of her. Now the protagonist realized that the healer wanted to say that she had taken away the curse that the Empress's sorceress had tried to put on her lover, but that she had died at his hands. Raising his head, the emperor reminded him that he had killed the Empress and the sorceress with his own hands, so the curse should have disappeared, but the healer immediately explained that if it was complete, it would not simply disappear, even after the caster died. According to the old man, the sorceress's target was the emperor, so the curse must have been so strong that it didn't disappear. Deciding not to bring up old times, the man stated that since they had found the culprit, they could find a cure, to which the old man replied that they needed to find a dark healer. The old man told the emperor that there was a man beyond the southern sea who could control souls, so he might be able to bring a distorted soul back to normal if he touched it. In fact, the emperor's interlocutor found only such a solution and believed that one healer could save his beloved, so it was decided to give it a try. After the doctor left, rumors spread throughout the empire, and the girl who fell in love with the young prince at first sight swore loyalty to him and took the curse to protect him. Now the protagonist was dying because of this, so she realized that the story of the knight who sacrificed himself for the emperor had been distorted and made romantic, leading to even more side-scrolling. Sighing tiredly, the protagonist realized that she was not in the most pleasant situation, and the knights who stood near her wondered if she was even listening to what they were saying. Turning to the protagonist once again, Utilia, a knight of the guard, suggested that she look at the blossoming trees together and eat her favorite dish when she was healthy. Her other acquaintances were here. Roselle and Pan, the knights of the guard, trying to hold back tears, were thinking of what they should do to help the girl recover, and the latter, hastening to stop them, guessed that she had many more things to think about, things that were already making her crazy. When the girl stated that she was fine, the knight flew up to her and asked her not to pretend, as they all already knew the truth, so she should stop saying it. Not paying attention to the protagonist's excitement, the girl explained that they were very surprised when they heard about her condition, for which she immediately apologized, and the guy who came over explained that they say that the emperor takes good care of her, so it will be great if they can defeat the curse with the power of love. The protagonist realized that the emperor really cared for her, but so well that it became a problem, and it had been 5 days since the healer's ramblings. From the moment the old man declared that the heroine had a warped soul, the emperor treated her as if she could break at any moment, and she became so bored with being in her room that she called her friends, who now began to cry. Much embarrassed, the heroine's friend asked if they could be in this bedroom, since it looked like a newlywed's room, which the latter immediately rushed to refute by strongly resenting it. A friend of the girl, deciding to get into the conversation, congratulated the one on becoming an empress, and her other acquaintance reminded her that the one had tried so hard that her love had made its way even to him. But these were only rumors, and now the man guessed that he was happy that the one could be happy. Tiredly covering his eyes, the guy asked his friend not to worry about the little things and just get better and tell him if she got worse. However, she reiterated that she wasn't sick. Lowering his head, the guy reminded him that the emperor was doing everything he could to find the dark healer, and many knights had set out to find him, so they would turn the whole empire upside down and find him somehow. Hearing the words of his friend, the girl, frightened, froze in place, asked if even the guard had left, and then reminded him that the emperor should not leave the palace unattended because then there would be no one to protect him. Tensing up, the guy explained that it appeared that she didn't understand the gravity of the situation, as it was a matter of life and death for the empress, the mother of the country. Ending with the commander already leading the search, the guy asked the heroine to stop thinking about others and focus on herself, to which she replied that she was already doing that. Now the protagonist thought that perhaps it would be better for her to wait for a dark healer to clear up the misunderstanding, but her thought was interrupted by a friend who asked how she had noticed the emperor's curse. Waving her friends away, the girl explained that there was no curse and that it was all just nonsense, since she had entered the palace at 15 and such a child simply could not notice the curse. Noticing her friend's disbelief, the girl reiterated her statement, but those guessed that she was hiding it because she was the emperor's personal knight and was not allowed to tell secrets. Exasperated, the girl exclaimed that if those were not going to believe her, they had better not ask, but at the same moment, a maid came into the room and inquired if she needed anything. The arrival of the assistant was the last straw, so she began waving a pillow, began to disperse her friends, who made her mad, and then, turning to the maid, explained that she should drive away the 3 knights. A few moments later, the main character's friends are outside the door and crying, guessing that she's faking it. But you can clearly see that her condition is terrible, so it's impossible to believe that she's okay. The heroine's closest friend recalled that she often missed attacks that she could easily dodge before, as if she felt pain, and was always ahead of them in everything. But now she had changed dramatically. The heroine's friends were closest to her, but didn't notice anything, so, crying even harder, the girl wondered what they would do if she died. But the other hurriedly shut her up, explaining that it wouldn't happen. In the evening of the same day, when the protagonist was lying in bed in the emperor's room, the latter, going through papers, guessed that she again could not sleep because she was tired of constant meetings with guests. Having received no answer from the girl and rising from his seat, the emperor inquired what was wrong with her and asked her to speak at once if there were any problems and not to hide anything from him. Approaching his beloved, the man said that she should not try to carry the burden alone, but she lowered her head and explained that she was just offended that he came every night just to work. Now the girl started complaining without even realizing it, and added that she had no idea when they would have to break up, so she wished she could spend more time with him together, which surprised him a lot. So he explained that they would never break up because he would fix her. Looking indifferently at the emperor, the girl reminded him that she hadn't been sick since the beginning, so it was impossible. She had been told that they were looking for a dark healer and, according to rumors, the man had even sent the commander of the guard to search for him. Turning away, the man guessed that his lover had been told what was going on by her visitors, so he immediately confirmed it, explaining that no one would do the job better than the guard, but the latter reminded him that they were responsible for his safety, and sending them out for such trifles was wrong. The protagonist realized that the emperor might not have many enemies now, but he still had them. But no sooner had she finished speaking than he turned to her again and asked if she cared so much about him. Smiling embarrassedly, the girl explained that it was only natural since she was a knight of the emperor and also the vice commander of the guard, but the man suggested that the reason was not only that, but also because she loved him. Blushing with embarrassment, the girl wondered what she should do now. She realized that they had always been together, but now the atmosphere was different, and her heart wouldn't stop pounding loudly. So without realizing what she should do, she replied that the emperor was quite handsome. Making himself comfortable next to the girl, the man stated that the imperial family had enough people with good looks. But the woman explained that no one could compare to him because he was the best. Looking at his lover strangely, the emperor admitted that he didn't know if he liked it or not, because he didn't expect her to be attracted only by her looks. The main character explained that she was the earl's illegitimate daughter, so she thought they looked alike. At first, she thought that's why she couldn't take her eyes off him, but at some point she had other feelings, but she doesn't know the reason why. Dreamily looking at the man, the girl explained that she loved him for nothing, and afterwards she asked him why he loved her, but he could not give an answer, and she realized that it was cruel of him. Turning away, the girl remembered that they say that if you love first, you lose, so she would sleep since he wasn't going to talk, for she was very tired. When the girl started to fall asleep, the man guessed that she just didn't realize that in this life or any other, he would always love her first. As the protagonist lay on her bed, she guessed that apparently everyone in the imperial palace was busy with something, and because of that, it seemed like she was the only one with plenty of time. The girl realized she was also busy in her own way, but no matter how much she read the rogue's contract, there was no end to it. And what worried her more was that Larocque hadn't told her anything, which meant something might have happened. Looking worriedly at the heroine, the girl explained that she would be gone for a while. This surprised her interlocutor very much, who did not understand what they would do about finding a loophole, to which the latter replied that she had an urgent business to attend to, and it was really important, though she did not want to leave her. Angry, the girl asked where she was going to go alone with this inferior body, and reminded her that she herself had said that it was made of mana and could not manifest its true power. With her head down guiltily, the guest explained that she was still a dragon, even if she appeared to her in such a form. Now she added that this was not the problem at all, which surprised the heroine, who realized that she had frightened her interlocutor. Clutching her head, the girl explained that she was well aware of the intent of what her acquaintance had said it with, so she shouldn't apologize, but it was actually her fault for leaving her when they already had little time. With a disappointed look at her guest, the protagonist confirmed that there was very little time, so she asked the woman if it was really that important to leave at a time like this. The protagonist made a contract and promised to find a body to break the seal, but 6 months of searching the empire yielded no fruit, and other countries were left, but she really didn't think she would be locked up in the palace for so long. The girl clutched the blanket fearfully and remembered that if she didn't fulfill the contract, she would die, and the shell of her acquaintance would run out of power and disappear, so she should leave after they had at least found a chance to get out of the palace. Looking away embarrassed, the guest apologized to her interlocutor, explaining that it was obligatory to do so now. She couldn't reveal the reasons, but she wanted to check one thing and return soon. Having guessed that she couldn't stop her acquaintance, the girl let her go, which surprised her, but she explained that she wasn't leaving for the last time anyway, and she shouldn't have asked if she had made it clear that she was going anyway. Looking at the protagonist with astonishment, the girl asked what would happen if she was suddenly late or didn't come back, to which she replied that in such a case there was only one option: to walk with her hand in hand to the afterlife. Sighing tiredly, the girl remembered that she sometimes forgot what kind of person the protagonist was, and the latter immediately explained that she believed that she would return, since she couldn't trust anyone else. Guessing that her interlocutor was upset, the girl promised to come back for sure, and the latter asked her to do her business quickly, adding that in the meantime, she would keep looking for some options. Smiling, Larocque stated that while she was gone, she wanted to give the girl one thing, and then explained that it was Estelle, a precious medicine that only the dragonkin could prepare, and it was worth drinking if there was a problem so that everything would go back to normal. Upon hearing the statement of her interlocutor, the girl asked if there could be a problem, and she wanted to say that the side effects would get worse, to which she replied that this was not the case at all, and she gave her the medicine just in case. Looking puzzled at the girl, the protagonist asked what problems she should drink it for, and the girl, smiling sweetly, explained that she should take the medicine when it seemed as if she was dying. Noticing the excitement of her interlocutor, the guest explained that it was a joke, and then told her that if she felt too strong influence of the contract, for example, she would bleed, she should drink a medicine, as it would balance all the processes in the body. Looking at the vial again, the girl asked her interlocutor why she hadn't given it to her before, to which she replied that it was quite hard to make and she was sealed, so she had to ask for a friend's help to barely prepare this. Now the protagonist realized that if this medicine was so valuable, it was better to drink it at once to take care of her body, but the guest immediately rushed to stop her. Straining hard, the girl explained that it was a dragon medicine, so it could cause side effects in humans, and afterward added that she had specifically warned her that it was for emergencies only. The protagonist walked to the conclusion that she would still have to take the medicine if something serious happened, to which her interlocutor replied that she really hoped it wouldn't happen, and then decided to leave. The girl took one last look at the heroine to say goodbye and explained that there would be nothing wrong if the fulfillment of the contract was delayed a bit, but she immediately remembered that she had said that death awaited her. The girl smirked and explained that it was motivation to keep the heroine busy, and she tried to grab her and realized that she was cheating her again, but she failed, and the guest left her. Losing her temper and looking after her, the girl called her a cheater again. Several days had passed since Larocque had left, and the protagonist still hadn't figured out how to find her body and wondered what she should do, but she was distracted from her musings by a servant girl who flew to her. Blushing with embarrassment, the girl asked the maid what they were talking about, to which she replied that it was about the founding of the empire, and that since the sky was clear, the stars would be better visible on the night of Jerusalem. The protagonist agreed with the maid, although in fact she was only concerned about the fact that her acquaintance left in a temporary body. But she immediately decided to stop worrying about this rogue because she is the kind of person who will always be okay. The more the girl thought about it, the angrier she became. And all the trouble she had gone through seemed in vain. But at the same moment, the maid noticed that she looked wary and inquired if she was in pain. The girl looked at the maid strangely and said that she had no pain, but the maid, not listening to her excuses, said that she would call a healer right away. But the maid waved her off and explained that she was just a little tired. The protagonist realized that one more such meeting, and she will have diseases that she had not had before. But the maid did not want to retreat, and so, flying up to the girl, grabbed her hand and exclaimed that she was tired, although she only did what she did, that she was lying down and idling. Turning away, the girl guessed that she sometimes didn't understand whether her maid loved her or hated her. But the maid, wanting to help her, explained that she definitely needed another appointment with the healer, adding that she could worry about him, but she cared more about her body. Before the girl could answer, the maid rushed to the door and ran out of the room in search of the healer, and the heroine, left alone with her thoughts, realized that now was not the time to worry about Larocque, because the first thing to worry about was herself. Frightenedly flew up to the protagonist, the healer asked what she was in pain. Such a sudden appearance of the old man surprised the girl very much, because the assistant had just left, and the guest immediately appeared in her room. Approaching the girl, the healer explained that he had come, and the girl, lowering her head tiredly, explained that it wasn't necessary, as she repeated for the 100th time that she was fine. Crying and clutching his heart, the old man asked her not to worry. He understood that the poor woman was very worried about him, so he wanted to help her even at the cost of his existence. And the girl, listening to his words, immediately decided that she would have to talk to the emperor when he came, so that he would immediately change the healer for another. The healer looked pitifully at the girl and asked her not to hide her pain and tell him where and what she was hurting so he could find a solution. But the girl, tiredly clutching her head, repeated that she was not sick and her maid had made a fuss over nothing. After examining the lady in disbelief, the old man wondered if she had no pain, but later concluded that she simply could not feel pain. Upon hearing the guest's statement, The girl asked him to repeat what he said, to which he replied that she kept saying she wasn't in pain, and he was beginning to doubt that she was even capable of feeling it. Pensive, the man guessed something, but the protagonist exclaimed that she didn't agree with it. But no sooner had she finished than a servant girl came up to them and asked what it meant. Tensing up, the man explained that seriously ill people sometimes feel so much pain that there are cases where they stop feeling it altogether, and signals are sent to the brain that are unconsciously blocked. Upon hearing the healer's statement, the maid covered her mouth fearfully, and he explained that soul distortion was necessarily accompanied by severe pain, and the curse had spread considerably, so he believed that she had reached the point where she had stopped feeling pain. Turning to the girl again, the old man summarized that she did not understand this and therefore thought that everything was all right. Now everyone understood why the landlady said she was all right, and she had already decided that she would not leave this old man alone, since it was as if he were writing a fairy tale. Grabbing the poor man's hands, the old man said that they shouldn't shake so much, and the fact that she couldn't feel pain was only proof that he was right. But the other one was pissed off and asked how long he was going to continue this nonsense. The girl explained that she was the vice commander of the emperor's elite guard and understood her own body far better than anyone else, but apparently the Tom thought she was lying. Tensing up, the healer explained that he hadn't meant to say that the one was lying at all, so the girl immediately exclaimed that he should believe what she was saying then, but as she lowered her head, she guessed that would never happen. Pensive, the protagonist explained that it was possible to test whether she felt pain or not by applying force on her body, but the old man explained that he could not harm the future empress. After hesitating a bit, the girl explained that she was still a knight, not an empress, so it was all a healing process and the responsibility would be hers alone, so it was decided to try to use force on her. Approaching the future empress, the healer took her hand and explained that he would hold it and squeeze it so that if she felt pain, she should tell him immediately. And she immediately realized that he had only worsened the misunderstanding with his burgundy arguments, and she should get rid of him in just one go. When the old man started to squeeze the girl's hand, he stated sometime later that he thought so. According to him, he pressed as hard as he could, but she didn't say a word. But the girl really didn't even think that he had used force. The protagonist realized that even a chick would be stronger than the healer, but immediately remembered that he had never held a sword, and asked him not to joke, because his hand should be clenched tighter. Almost fainting, the maid guessed that the words of the healer turned out to be true, but the protagonist, once again grabbing her head, explained that it was all a lie, because the one had the grip of a chick, but the one, badly frightened, asked her to just admit it, because if she gets so angry, it will only get worse. Out of temper, the girl exclaimed that she shouldn't admit anything because it wasn't true, but at the same moment a servant girl who flew over to her hurriedly calmed her down without letting her finish her sentence. Coughing, the old man summarized that he didn't think they had much time left since she was in such a state, so they needed to find a healer as soon as possible, and the girl should take it easy now because her condition could worsen. Frozen in place, the protagonist decided she was going to be angry because it had happened again, and now she jumped off the bed, explaining that she didn't want to see anyone. Rushing to the exit, the girl said she couldn't take it anymore, but as soon as she tried to leave the room, the knight wanted to stop her, but she was so fast that he didn't succeed. Desperately screaming, the girl asked the men not to run after her, but just to leave her alone, but it did not work on them. And sometime later, she ran away and hid behind a column and began to breathe heavily, realizing that she would go crazy like that. As she sat down on the floor, the protagonist guessed that she didn't mean to run away, but it pissed her off. She knew that this would be reported to the emperor immediately, but it would be useless since she wouldn't be able to leave the palace anyway. Shrinking back, the girl decided that she needed to come up with an excuse if she had to go back. But no sooner had she done anything than she saw a man with blonde hair in front of her, who approached her and asked why she was here. Looking closer, the girl realized that the man in front of him was the foreign minister, a man from the emperor's faction, and her half-brother, whom she would not want to meet in a situation like this, Ascalbodabane. Looking at the guy fearfully, the girl remembered that he was supposed to be another country. So she didn't understand where he had come from, and the guy interjected again as to why she was here and explained that from the looks of it, she had run away. Frozen in place, the girl wondered what was even going on. What surprised her was his emotionless and cold speech, though she realized that they were bound only by blood relation, and it was hard to call such a relationship familial. The guy's eyes now only reflected that she was disgracing the family with this appearance, because even if the emperor wants to make her an empress, it doesn't negate the fact that she's an illegitimate daughter. The girl realized that tomorrow, rumors would spread around the palace that the future empress was running around the castle like a madwoman, and it would be a scandal for her family and another trouble for the emperor. And excuses would only aggravate the situation, so it was better to end it all with an apology. Guiltily lowering her head, the protagonist apologized to her half-brother, and the latter leaned in front of her and explained that she usually didn't just run away like that, so apparently she was really having a hard time, but he decided not to ask anything. Putting his arm around the girl, the man asked her to stop sitting on the floor and lean on him, and to shift the load so that her legs would not tire. Noticing the embarrassment of her interlocutor, he asked her to stop apologizing so much. Now the man explained that if the emperor found out about this, he would be worried, so they should go back. And besides, the whole family is now also looking for a dark healer, but so many resources have been invested that they can't find one. With a frightened look at the attendant, the girl guessed that even the count himself, the father who didn't care about her, was looking for a dark healer, which meant that the situation scared everyone. With a hopeful look at his half-sister, the boy asked her not to worry and focus on her recovery, so she immediately guessed that she wasn't worried, and he looked away and explained that their conversation had gone on too long and they should go back to her room. When she heard that her brother wanted to see her off, the girl didn't understand why he would do that. And afterwards, looking at him confused, she explained that she could go herself, but he said that she had no reason to refuse, and it was better to stop being stubborn when her body was in such a state. The protagonist realized that now it would look like she ran away and caused a lot of trouble, and her relative caught her and brought her back. So, if they go together, the rumors that the civil servant caught the vice commander of the guard would spread very quickly. Shuddering, the girl guessed that she had better crawl to her room herself, so she should refuse his offer, and if she couldn't make it, she should run away. But at the same moment, her head ached sharply, and she decided that she needed to go faster. However, she immediately passed out. When the protagonist came to her senses, she noticed that the emperor and Larocque were standing in front of her, but they were in a very strange place. The guest asked the men why he was so insolent, for they could be called ancestors. The girl assumed it was a dream, as she didn't expect to see people together. And at the same moment, the man stated that it was complete nonsense, and it was not the time for such nonsense. Deciding to get in on the conversation, the protagonist's half-brother asked people to shut up, while she looked around, wondering why they were all gathered in one place and what kind of kid was that now approached her. Noticing that the girl had regained consciousness, her half-brother, who said she was in a bad state, approached her and asked if she was all right. With a stern look at the boy, the man asked him to move away, which the heroine's half-brother confirmed, adding that since she was already awake, the child should move away from his sister. Clinging to the girl, the boy confessed that these people had been bullying him all this time, and the heroine, who was unaware of who he was, turned to the emperor and asked him not to push the child around. Approaching his beloved, the emperor declared that it was not a child, and the latter, looking at the baby, explained that everything was clear to her. But the man, clutching his head, asked how she could even see such a thing. When the emperor asked the boy to step back again, the girl guessed that it had been a long time since she had seen him so annoyed, so she assumed that her lover was jealous, but the man didn't respond, and she realized that this was definitely the case and was happening even to a small child, which meant that the emperor had a surprisingly sweet side. Looking seriously at the girl, the man asked to take another close look at the person who seemed to be a child, which she immediately did, but realized that it wasn't a small child at all, as a large man appeared in his place. Looking at the protagonist and grinning, the man asked her if she didn't know that, and then asked her to wake up. Nothing happened, but the girl realized that she heard a voice that asked her to open her eyes again. This unfamiliar voice startled the man and the heroine, but he tried to calm her down and kept asking her to wake up. So the young man, laughing, explained that there was nothing to be done and the protagonist should wake up since she was called, because they would still meet again even if she didn't want to. When the protagonist opened her eyes, she saw the emperor in front of her and wondered what he was doing here and why his hands were shaking so much. And then, looking around, wondered where the man who was here had gone and when so many people had managed to gather. After looking around, the girl asked the man what this place was, to which he replied that they were in the temple of Ryut, the god of the dead. So that scared the heroine a lot. Now the protagonist remembered talking to her brother Askal, and she also saw the emperor, a dragon, and a man in black who pretended to be a child, but apparently it was all a dream and she lost consciousness and was brought here for treatment. What confused the girl the most was that she was not brought to the temple of the god of the living, but to the temple of the god of the dead. But that said, most of the healers who perform the treatment are from the temple of Jorsala, so she decided to ask the emperor what she was doing here. Guiltily lowering his head, the man admitted that his beloved had stopped breathing, however. She could not believe it. But he explained that recently, her soul had calmed down. Annoyed, the girl suggested that they were talking nonsense again, and it was probably that healer again, to which the man replied that he had said there was nothing more he could do for her. When the girl demanded of the people the name of the person who had said this nonsense, the emperor pressed against her and asked her to calm down, but she would not be able to do so. The heroine admitted that she understands that the emperor was worried when she briefly caught her breath, but coming to Ryut Shrine for such a silly reason is weird. Pulling away from the girl, the man stated that she hadn't breathed for 3 days, so there was nothing more he could do. And the girl immediately realized that it turned out this wasn't happening to her for a few seconds.